Okay, let's unpack this. We're going to be spending some serious time diving into the ultimate blueprint for human achievement, the principles of mastery. Now, when most people think of mastery, they picture lightning striking, a moment of inborn, effortless genius reserved for the lucky few.
And that, right there, is the first dangerous myth we have to dismantle.
Right.
Our mission today is to show you that mastery is absolutely not some kind of magical gift. It is a deliberate, painstaking, and ultimately rewarding process. It's a journey, really. And it's accessible through specific, non-negotiable strategies and some critical internal transformations.
And we're drawing this from where?
Exactly.
We're distilling the research from, well, everywhere. Cognitive science, creativity studies, and of course, the biographies of masters across centuries. We're talking Leonardo da Vinci, Charles Darwin, all the way up to contemporary figures like Temple Grandin and Paul Graham. So we're treating this deep dive like a grand, long-form story, following the paths taken by figures like Benjamin Franklin and Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Our goal is simple: to give you the guidance necessary to move from being a novice to a true master, allowing you to bypass those valuable years so often wasted trying to gain knowledge without a clear strategic path.
And crucially, we have to reject the cultural tendency to look for shortcuts.
Mm.
You cannot skip steps.
No.
You cannot rely solely on natural talents, especially not in an era defined by information overload and complexity. It just won't work.
That sentiment, that necessary seriousness, was captured perfectly by the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. He often dismissed the romantic notion of inborn genius.
Yes, he did.
He argued that true greatness is acquired through the seriousness of the efficient workman who first masters the parts properly, the little mundane things, before venturing to fashion a great whole.
They take more pleasure in perfecting those secondary things than in the effect of a dazzling result.
That rigorous focus on the mundane, that dedication to process, is really the backbone of the entire journey.
It is. And we see this journey involving three fundamental transformations of your character and your mind.
Okay, so the first transformation is the inner work, finding your primal inclination, what we call your life's task. This sets your direction.
Right. Then the second is the necessary transformation of your character, the grinding, often brutal process of skill acquisition and discipline known as the apprenticeship phase.
And the third, the explosion, awakening your dimensional intelligence in the creative active phase, where you start to question and ultimately reshape the field itself.
So we have to start at the foundation. We must start with answering that inner call.
Mm-hmm.
If you look across the biographies of great masters, you find this remarkable commonality. So many of them confess to experiencing some kind of hidden force, a voice, or a deep sense of destiny that actively guided their path forward.
It's not just a preference, then.
Not at all. It was a compulsion.
It's a compelling concept because they articulate this force with such specificity. I'm thinking of Napoleon Bonaparte, who felt guided by his star. It was always ascending and, clarifying his path when he made the right strategic moves.
And centuries before him, you have Socrates describing his demon.
A demon, not like a demon, but more of an inner voice.
Exactly, a guiding spirit that spoke to him, not telling him what to do, but always in the negative, warning him what he absolutely must avoid.
Fascinating.
Goethe also spoke of this internal demon, a kind of spirit dwelling within him that compelled him toward fulfilling his destiny as a writer and a polymath.
And in modern times,
Einstein, right?
Albert Einstein, yes. He described it as a kind of powerful inner voice that shaped the entire direction of his speculations. It was like this persistent whisper of a question that just demanded to be answered. This force is the deep personal compass pointing toward a vocation that feels less like a choice and more like a fate.
And the life of Leonardo da Vinci is maybe the most dramatic illustration of this inner compulsion.
Oh, absolutely. This hidden force was what drew him away from Verrocchio's studio and out into the wildest parts of the Tuscan landscape. He didn't just casually sketch. He was compelled to observe life's immense variety in its most intense forms.
It was this compulsion that forced him to steal paper as a child because he couldn't stop sketching. It guided his extreme audacity later in life, from attempting gigantic bronze sculptures and, mechanical flight designs that seemed impossible,
to the really painstaking, dangerous work of dissecting hundreds of human corpses.
And why? Not just to draw anatomy. He was trying to find the essence of life itself, to capture the soul's reflection in the face. His art and science were unified by this relentless primary attraction.
Which brings us to the first practical stage for you, the listener. Reconnecting with that primal inclination.
And this is not about finding a new interest. It's an inward archaeological search.
You have to actively clear away the static, the confusing outside voices of societal expectation, the desires of parents, the lure of lucrative careers that promise comfort but deliver emptiness. You have to search your past for signs of that original inner voice.
Because the trap is this. If you lose contact with that primal inclination, you inevitably end up following a path based on conformity or superficial desires.
Right, you might chase money or status, achieve some level of external success.
But the lack of true inner desire always catches up. Effectiveness wanes, and you find yourself professionally adrift, realizing you're building someone else's dream, not your own.
So to re-engage that force, we have to look for the origin point, that singular, visceral spark of wonder, which often appears in childhood before all the conditioning sets in.
The classic example is Albert Einstein. At the age of 5, he was confined to bed with an illness. His father gave him a simple compass.
Just a compass.
Just a compass. And Einstein was instantly, profoundly transfixed. The needle moved in response to an invisible magnetic force, an unknown field. This simple object touched him to his core.
And that led to his lifelong, defining question that drove all his research.
Exactly. Are there other forces in the world, equally invisible yet powerful, that are undiscovered or misunderstood? All his subsequent interests and revolutionary ideas revolved around the desire to map those invisible fields.
That's such a powerful moment of intellectual awakening, and it came from observation. Now contrast that with Martha Graham, whose inclination was completely different. It manifested as a feeling of visceral power through action.
Yes. She felt intensely frustrated by the inadequacy of standard language to express her deepest, most complex emotions. Words just weren't enough.
And then she saw her first dance performance.
And everything clicked. The movement was primal, nonverbal, and instantly expressive in a way words could never be. She immediately understood her vocation. She only felt truly alive, expressive, and capable when dancing.
Which led her to revolutionize the entire genre and invent a whole new form of modern dance.
The key takeaway here is profoundly liberating. You are not tasked with creating this inclination. That internal drive is already there.
You just need to refine what has been buried beneath years of societal pressure and conditioning.
Exactly. Look for those traces in your earliest years. Those visceral reactions to simple objects, the activities you never tired of, the feelings of unadulterated power attached to specific actions.
If you reconnect with this core, that primitive attraction will spark back to life and illuminate your true path.
And often, when you find this true path, you realize that your inclination is unusual, even anomalous.
And that's a good thing.
It's a strength, surprisingly. This leads us to what we call the Darwinian strategy. Occupying the perfect niche.
Why Darwinian?
Because anomalies lead to the occupation of new ecological niches, where competition is either minimal or non-existent. If your interest is slightly sideways from the established fields, that difference gives you a profound advantage.
Let's look at V.S. Ramachandran. He grew up in Madras in the 1950s and felt profoundly different. He was only interested in reading about science and collecting things rather than sports.
He developed a feeling of power by collecting seashells, and he became fascinated by the strange xenophora.
The what now?
The xenophora. It's a shell that collects discarded shells from other creatures for its own camouflage. It was an anomaly of the natural world, much like Ramachandran himself felt.
And importantly, this niche interest transferred perfectly to his later career.
It did. His fascination with the abnormal, the peculiar phenomena, the xenophora, translated into an intense curiosity about human anatomical abnormalities, especially peculiar neurological and visual phenomena.
But his initial path was conventional. His father pushed him into medical school for a practical skill.
Ramachandran complied, but he quickly grew restless. He detested the rote memorization of standard anatomical facts. He wanted to discover, to experiment, to break the mold.
So his true breakthrough emerged indirectly.
He started reading outside the rigid curriculum and was captivated by Richard Gregory's book, Eye and Brain, particularly the sections on optical illusions and blind spots.
Anomalies.
Anomalies in the visual system that could reveal the brain's internal programming. That anomaly was the pivot point. It led him to visual neuroscience at Cambridge, not through a straight line, but through what we call the path of zigzags.
He realized that the way forward wasn't a predetermined course?
No, it was a journey where he started in a field that roughly corresponded to his inclination, then constantly adjusted based on which specific side routes truly attracted him.
The profound implication for you is that you must treat your vocational path as an evolving journey, not a static commitment.
Absolutely. Start in a field that's close enough, but then constantly observe and adjust. What are the specific aspects that draw you in? What are the anomalies in your field that no one else is investigating?
That's your niche.
That's your niche. You leverage the skills you acquire in the main role, like Leonardo did with Verrocchio or Ramachandran did with his medical training, and use them as the tools to build your own unique empire.
So, you've answered the inner call, you've identified your life's task. But the story doesn't end there. Now begins the grueling, non-negotiable phase of skill acquisition. We call it the forge.
This is the apprenticeship.
And we must engrave this truth deeply. The goal is not money, a title, or a diploma, but the transformation of your mind and character.
This is the first great transformation you undergo. You must intentionally move yourself from someone who is impatient, easily distracted, and scattered into someone who is profoundly disciplined, focused, and capable of handling high complexity.
If you skip this, you will never be able to handle the chaos and ambiguity that defines true mastery.
And this phase has never been more relevant than it is right now. In our information age, we're constantly bombarded with media, alerts, and distractions.
The great division emerging isn't based on innate intelligence, but between those who can train themselves to manage this complexity, focus deeply, and retain long chains of thought, and those who are just overwhelmed.
The apprenticeship is the antidote to digital distraction.
And beyond the cognitive transformation, there is the social cure. When people emerge from youthful dependency, they're often dangerously unprepared for the harsh realities of the work world.
Oh, completely. They carry a social naivete, still seeking affirmation, attention, and immediate success. The apprenticeship exposes this naivete to the brutal reality of competition, political games, and the necessity of self-reliance.
So let's start with strategy 1, the core mindset of the apprentice: value learning over money. And Benjamin Franklin provides the perfect case study in prioritizing development over comfort.
He does. In 1718, when he was just 12, Franklin's father wanted him to apprentice in the family's lucrative candle-making business. It was a sure path to security.
But Benjamin saw only tedium. He hated the routine and threatened to run away to sea.
His father eventually relented, and Franklin chose the harder path, a 9-year apprenticeship in his older brother James's printing shop. This was riskier and far longer.
But Franklin was determined to become a writer and a man of letters. The printing trade was simply the necessary means, the vehicle for his true aspiration.
He executed what we call a covert education. While performing the manual labor of typesetting, he used the shop as his laboratory.
He studied English newspapers reprinted by the shop, asking to proofread and oversee the printing of his favorite articles.
And this gave him the opportunity to study the rhetorical styles and structures in forensic detail, teaching himself to imitate and then surpass those established writers. He transformed the shop into his own highly efficient writing apprenticeship.
And he acquired the printing business skills as a critical side benefit he didn't even initially value.
Exactly. Now that focus is critical. We see the cost of ignoring this priority in the world of Dance with Martha Graham.
Right. After years of intense training, she accepted a well-paid 2-year stint in a folly show in New York, and she rationalized that the money would buy her freedom later.
But she quickly discovered that commercial work drained her creative energy entirely. She became dependent on the paycheck and found that the desire to work on her own ideas, her real calling, had been suppressed by the demands of performing for mass entertainment.
So she determined that commercial work was a poison, destroying the internal energy required for true transformation.
That's the danger of valuing the paycheck over the transformation of the self.
Once that direction is set, the path gets smoother if you follow strategy 2, the mentor dynamic. Life is short. Guidance prevents wasted years and shortens the necessary period of trial and error.
Indeed. Goethe, always the observer of human nature, remarked that a man of talent should not be left to himself, but must devote himself to good masters who will make something of him.
But the ultimate goal isn't loyalty to the person.
No, it's loyalty to the knowledge. You must internalize their wisdom and eventually surpass them. Never, ever remain in their shadow.
The relationship between Michael Faraday and Humphrey Davy is the classic complex illustration of this dynamic.
It is. Faraday chose learning over money, accepting the role of lab assistant to the famous chemist Davy, a job that involved cleaning bottles, sweeping floors, lighting fires.
And it paid considerably less than his former job as a bookbinder.
But the education he received was unparalleled. He worked night and day, bringing scientific order to Davy's chaotic lab, He rapidly learned chemical analysis, how to prepare complex and even explosive mixtures, and mastered the rudimentary skills of experimentation from the greatest living chemist of the era.
And most critically, he witnessed Davy's creative process up close. There was the famous diamond experiment.
Right. Scientists knew diamonds and charcoal were related. But how could something so crystalline and beautiful be chemically identical to dirty charcoal? Davy speculated that the difference was not in the elements, but a profound change in the underlying molecular structure.
That's fundamentally dynamic, modern view of nature.
It is. And to prove it, while traveling in Florence, Davy used the massive lens at the Accademia del Cimento. He focused intense sunlight onto a diamond placed inside a tiny glass globe of pure oxygen.
And the diamond just vanished.
It evaporated completely, leaving behind only carbon dioxide gas, proving it was, in fact, pure carbon.
Wow. Imagine being Faraday and seeing Davy literally burn a diamond using focused sunlight. That must have fundamentally shifted his view of chemistry.
What impressed him most wasn't the result, but the thought process. Moving from a simple, radical speculation to devising the one highly creative experiment that would physically demonstrate the idea, excluding all other possibilities. That showed Faraday the reality-based engine of true scientific power.
But the dynamic soured.
It did. After 8 intense years, Faraday was an accomplished chemist to his own right. However, the celebrated Davy, driven by envy and insecurity, began to deliberately hold him back.
Assigning him menial tasks and even, sending packets of dead flies for Davy's fishing lures while he was away.
That's the one. Faraday had to confront the unpleasant truth. His mentor had become his obstacle. He realized he had reached the point where he had to declare independence or risk remaining trapped permanently in Davy's increasingly jealous shadow.
So the necessary break, while painful, was essential for his future mastery.
And this necessity of breaking free often requires strategy 3, the rebellion strategy. This is about avoiding or breaking free from the false path.
What's a false path?
A false path is attractive because it offers easy money, immediate fame, or, most dangerously, approval from figures like parents.
Look at Wolfgang Mozart. He started the piano at age 4, partly out of a deeply ingrained sibling rivalry, seeking the attention and love his sister received.
And under his demanding father Leopold, he submitted willingly, developing his prodigious talent. But Leopold forced him to write conventional, court-pleasing pieces that brought in desperately needed money in provincial Salzburg.
Mozart felt increasingly stifled. His true creative urges were constrained by the need for conformity.
Then, in 1781, while in Vienna, Mozart made the fateful decision. He would never return to Salzburg.
This decision caused a permanent, painful rift with his father, destroying his relationship with the one person who had guided his entire life.
But the rebellion served a purpose. Feeling he had lost so much time conforming, he exploded in an unprecedented creative outburst. His most famous operas and compositions poured out of him at a furious pace, reflecting the desperate hunger to finally fulfill his own artistic destiny.
The lesson here is brutal, but necessary. Realize as early as possible when you have chosen a path for the wrong reasons.
If your decisions are dominated by anxiety for money or approval, you must actively rebel against those forces pushing you away from your life's task. If a Leopold Mozart figure is blocking your path, you must metaphorically slay him and clear the way.
Let the rebellion be the fuel that drives you to independence.
Moving on to strategy 4. Advance through trial and error, embracing what we call the hacker mentality, as exemplified by Paul Graham.
Right. Graham was fascinated by computers on TV, leading him to focus his high school gifted program project on the school's primitive IBM mainframe, programmed with punch cards.
He taught himself mostly by consulting a few rudimentary books, but primarily by trial and error. He describes this process, the very essence of a hacker, as immensely satisfying, allowing him to discover things on his own without a rigid institutional path.
When the complex programming worked, it had a satisfying aesthetic rightness to it.
And this process teaches you the value of failure. Graham learned that there are 2 kinds of failure. The kind that destroys you, which is never trying because you're waiting for the perfect moment, and failing boldly, from which you learn everything.
It's often noted in the research that it is actually a curse to succeed on the first attempt.
A total curse, because you fail to question the element of luck or the specific constraints that allowed that success. When you inevitably fail later, it confuses and demoralizes you beyond the point of learning.
And Graham's later venture, Y Combinator, was his ultimate hack, a continuous trial-and-error apprenticeship system for entrepreneurs, constantly refined through testing and rapid feedback.
Finally, strategy 5. Combine the how and the what. 5 centuries ago, there was a profound split between art and science. The future of mastery, as exemplified by the architect Santiago Calatrava, requires combining these two worlds.
Understanding the outer world of appearances, the what, and the hidden world of function, the how.
Exactly. Calatrava, growing up in Valencia, Spain, was obsessed with two things: drawing and engineering. He loved capturing movement and change in still images.
Yet in architecture, the golden rule was stability and rigidity. He wanted to break that rigidity and express change.
His initial apprenticeship began by grounding himself in the rigors of engineering, all the mathematics, physics, and load-bearing structures. But for his PhD dissertation, he returned to his childhood paradox: how to express movement.
And he chose to explore the foldability of structures, inspired by NASA designs for space travel and Leonardo da Vinci's folding bird wings.
This research seamlessly combined the conceptual poetry of movement and structure, the what, with the absolute non-negotiable rigors of engineering, the how things function and bear stress.
So he intuited that this combined, rounded knowledge is essential.
You must constantly ask the critical questions in your own field. How do things really work at a molecular level? How are organizational decisions truly made? How does the group interact beneath the surface? Rounding your knowledge gives you the heightened power to fundamentally alter your field.
The apprenticeship transforms our mind for complexity, but the journey to mastery is rarely purely academic. Now we turn to the messy world of people, the social environment, which we call the chessboard.
This is the crucial transition from naive idealism to realistic social navigation.
The greatest obstacle to mastery for most people is the sheer emotional drain of dealing with resistance, manipulation, and the anxieties of others.
We call this the naive perspective. We carry over these protected, often childish illusions from a sheltered dependency into the adult world. In the work environment, the stakes are raised from good grades to survival and professional reputation.
People are struggling for resources, they manipulate, they compete.
And they reveal qualities they concealed while operating in a safer environment. Your naivete is brutally exposed in this light.
Right, because the real world doesn't play by school rules. If we don't adjust, we get entangled in petty emotional issues, which completely distracts us from the crucial work of learning and creating.
And if we carry these childish attitudes into the public phases of our careers, social ineptitude can be fatal to our long-term success.
Even Darwin, while celebrating humanity, acknowledged that man, with all his noble qualities, still bears the indelible stamp of his lowly origin.
Meaning we are still driven by primal, competitive, and often irrational social urges. The transformation begins, as Benjamin Franklin learned, by turning the lens inward. The goal is to move from being an emotional reactor to a detached observer.
And Franklin's early career is just a series of lessons in social blunder. First, the brothers' betrayal. After secretly writing the popular do-good letters, he confessed the authorship to his older brother James, expecting praise and camaraderie.
Instead, he unleashed James's envy and malevolence. He was totally unaware of the effect his precociousness would have on a jealous rival who already controlled his life.
Then came the governor's deception in Philadelphia. Franklin met Governor Keith, who promised a crucial loan to help him start his own printing shop.
And Franklin was so wrapped up in his dreams of independence and success that he completely ignored the obvious signs that the governor was merely all talk, leading him to waste a trip to London on false pretenses.
He got played. He was fooled because he projected his own industrious, honest desires onto a man who was clearly a politician and a schemer.
And the most illustrative failure, the beer fund ghost in London. While working in a printing shop, Franklin, ever the rational reformer, refused to contribute to his colleagues' weekly beer fund out of principle, arguing that beer made them lazy.
Which probably didn't go over well.
Not at all. Soon after, strange errors kept appearing in the texts he proofread. He was consistently blamed, nearly losing his job. When he finally gave in and paid the fund, the mistakes and the mischievous ghost responsible suddenly disappeared.
His rational anger blinded him. He could not see that his colleagues didn't care about his principle. They resented his perceived moral superiority and his attempts to reform their customs.
The realization was profound. He was supremely rational about his work, always looking for efficiency, but hopelessly emotional and naive with people.
This realization led to his great shift in social rationality. He reached awareness not by focusing on how others wronged him, but on how he failed to read the social environment, projected his desires, or ignored the clear signs of resentment and jealousy.
And this new social intelligence was immediately put to the test when he returned to Philadelphia and found work with his former prickly employer, Keimer, who acted strangely friendly.
This is where he started thinking inside the enemy.
Exactly. He sensed that Keimer greatly resented his departure for London and was scheming revenge. Use Franklin's superior expertise to train new, cheaper employees, then fire him and steal his customers.
Franklin's counter-strategy was a masterwork of detachment. Instead of acting angry or confronting Keimer, he treated the situation like a game of maneuvers on a chessboard.
He quietly used his position to build deep, positive relationships with Keimer's customers and secretly taught himself highly valuable side skills like engraving and ink making. He cultivated a first-rate assistant in the shop.
So just when he sensed the firing was imminent,
He left, taking his carefully cultivated customers and his newly acquired capital with him, setting up his own shop in a prime location. He played the social game to perfection, with a clear and level head.
that shift from being a reactive, emotional actor to a clear-headed, strategic observer is the definition of mastering the social chessboard.
Which brings us to strategy 1 in the public arena. Speak through your work. Your emotional state about criticism should never fuel your response. Your results should.
And the contrast between Ignaz Semmelweis and William Harvey is tragic and absolute.
Ignaz Semmelweis discovered the cause of childbed fever in Vienna in 1846. The contagion was spread by doctors moving directly from the autopsy room to the maternity ward. He was on the brink of saving countless lives.
But his department head, Johann Klein, was a conservative who deeply resented Semmelweis as an inexperienced radical attempting to overturn the establishment's wisdom.
Semmelweis was so consumed by righteous anger and scorn toward the closed-minded profession that he refused to take the time to conduct controlled, scholarly experiments or write a book to prove his theory rigorously.
Why should he when the truth felt so apparent?
Right. Instead, he gave angry lecturing presentations that alienated his colleagues, who simply saw him as self-promoting without scholarly rigor. He was eventually dismissed from Vienna.
And his discovery, arguably one of the most important of the century, was ignored for decades because his emotionality overshadowed his data.
Now contrast this tragic waste with William Harvey, the discoverer of blood circulation. Harvey knew his theory was fundamentally radical and would stir up immense enmity, forcing his colleagues to completely overturn centuries of accepted anatomical knowledge.
So to conquer the inevitable envy, he employed strategic patience.
He delayed publishing his findings for years, waiting until he had amassed absolutely overwhelming, irrefutable evidence and secured his position as one of the highest officers within the College of Physicians.
So when he finally presented his work, he did so politely, relying entirely on the weight and strength of his meticulous data. He remained mostly silent in the face of numerous publications discrediting him.
His friend, Thomas Hobbes, observed that Harvey was the only man I know who, conquering envy, hath established a new doctrine in his lifetime.
The work spoke for itself, removing the need for emotional defense.
That strategic patience and control leads us to strategy 2. Craft the appropriate persona. Assuming the appearance and manners of the culture at hand allows you to achieve your strategic goals without compromising the integrity of your core work.
Benjamin Franklin applied this masterfully during the War of Independence. He was sent to France as a special commissioner to secure critical financing and a military alliance.
And Franklin was often criticized by fellow Americans, like John Adams, for attending lavish parties, flirting, and generally appearing frivolous.
But Franklin was thinking strategically. He understood French nature, their deep appreciation for style, and their national narcissism. He didn't arrive as a stern Puritan. He transformed himself into the American version of the Enlightenment spirit charming, witty, and intriguing.
This persona made him a beloved figure in Paris, appealing directly to their vanity. It allowed him to broker a vital military alliance and secure the financing nobody else could have possibly wrested from the French king.
We see this same calculated transformation in Temple Grandin. Grandin, who has high-functioning autism, struggled intensely with social flaws. She was often too honest, brusque, and rubbed people the wrong way.
She realized these deficiencies were actively threatening her livelihood when she was fired for writing a brutally honest letter to a company president about their poor designs.
Yeah.
She was intellectually correct, but socially disruptive.
But she possessed the peculiar, almost objective ability to see herself from the outside.
And she used this gift to meticulously study and practice social behavior as if she were learning a foreign language. She methodically fixed her social expression, not by fixing her innate neurological equipment, but by mastering the external rules of engagement.
Her eventual success in becoming an engaging, entertaining speaker who holds attention better than most came entirely from this ruthless self-observation and relentless social practice.
Finally, strategy 3. Suffer fools gladly. This is not about being a martyr. It is a high-level strategy about avoiding becoming emotionally entangled in social dramas and triviality that consume the time of lesser minds.
And Johann Wolfgang Goethe provides the classic blueprint. Invited to the court of Duke Karl August in Weimar in 1775, Goethe found court life unbearable. It revolved entirely around card games, gossip, and trivial dramas.
They never discussed profound ideas, only surfaces.
As a confirmed realist, Goethe chose not to complain or become indignant, realizing it was useless to fight what he could not change.
He adopted a specific social strategy. He chose to talk very little, rarely venturing a strong opinion. And instead, he mastered the art of getting his interlocutors to talk endlessly about themselves.
This was not mere toleration.
No, it was a profound, detached observational exercise. By not engaging emotionally in the petty dramas, he built an immense knowledge of various characters, which became the raw material for his later literary work. He gained the social dexterity necessary for the conduct of life by regarding every man as an independent, predictable individual whom he endeavored to understand without hoping for any further sympathy.
That detachment is the key to thriving on the chessboard. We've arrived at the final stage of the master's journey, the dimensional leap. You have internalized the rules during the apprenticeship, and you've mastered the social arena of the chessboard. Now your mind is ready for the second great transformation, the creative active phase.
The danger here is that anxiety leads to conservatism. You feel secure in the procedures you learned and you stick to them, worried that any deviation will lead to failure or instability.
But mastery requires the opposite.
It does. You must force yourself to become increasingly bold. This means constantly expanding your knowledge to related fields, making new and unexpected associations, and experimenting from all possible angles.
And most crucially, you will turn against the very rules you internalized and reform them to suit your spirit. This originality, this reshaping of the field, leads to the heights of power.
We call the product of this phase dimensional intelligence.
Mozart provides the perfect illustration of this explosion after years of control.
After his rebellion against Leopold, his reconnection with his original true desire led to an unparalleled creative outburst. He wasn't just writing music, he was fundamentally changing the structures of opera and symphony.
And his speed of composition, like writing the Don Giovanni Overture in mere hours after an evening of drinking, was widely seen as a miracle.
But it was not a divine gift. It was the reflection of a prodigious memory and a mind capable of holding and organizing all the complex harmonies and melodies he had absorbed over 2 decades. His mind had evolved to think powerfully in musical blocks.
So he could transcribe them as quickly as he heard them in his head. The long, intense apprenticeship was the necessary preparation for that explosive moment of freedom.
This stage operates under what we call the primary law of creative dynamic. You must let go of the need for comfort and security.
Creative endeavors are inherently uncertain and destabilizing. If you are worried about failure, criticism, or instability, your mind will unconsciously tether itself to conventions, and your ideas will grow stale and flat.
You have to see yourself as an explorer unwilling to stay on the shore, embracing the risks of the open ocean.
And to navigate that open ocean, strategy 1 is essential: fusing intuition and rationality. Mastery requires what we call the current, a constant cycling dialogue between speculation thoughts, theory and observation, or experiment reality.
There are 2 great traps in intellectual life that inhibit this current. The first is emotional speculation without verification. Pure theory disconnected from physical reality.
The second, and perhaps more common today, is accumulating mountains of facts and data without ever venturing to speculate on the larger ramifications.
Which is a fear of subjective, grand ideas that leaves you stuck in the micro-view, unable to see the invisible fields of force that connect things. Speculation is the heart and soul of advanced rationality.
And the intuition we see in masters is often misinterpreted as mystical, but it's not.
Not at all. It is nothing more than a sudden and immediate seizing of what is real without the need for words or formulas. It is profoundly synthesized knowledge, a blend of the instinctive and the rational, deeply connecting the master to the environment of their subject.
Think of the chess master Bobby Fischer. He didn't see simple moves. His brain, through years of obsessive practice, internalized incredible numbers of patterns.
All these memories fused into an instantaneous, powerful feel for the dynamic of the game. He saw long sequences of potential moves as cohesive fields of force, allowing him to entrap opponents quickly and precisely. His intuition was simply pattern recognition operating at an astonishing unconscious speed.
The result of immense effort.
Exactly. And to achieve that level of insight, you often need strategy too. Reversing the conventional path, often by adopting a superior analogy, as the Wright brothers did.
Right. In the early 1900s, the biggest names in aviation figures like Samuel Langley, funded by massive government grants focused on technology, power, and specialization.
Their underlying assumption was the ship analogy. They emphasized stability and mass in an alien medium, believing that a powerful engine and a large vessel were the key.
They couldn't stay airborne long enough to learn how to fly, leading to constant expensive crashes.
Meanwhile, the Wright brothers, coming from a modest background, owned a superior bicycle shop, emphasizing craftsmanship, tinkering, and repetition.
They rejected the abstract approach and adopted the bicycle analogy.
Which emphasized the importance of the rider, or pilot, and control, not the machine's power.
Their model depended not on superior technology or abstract theory, but on the highest number of test runs and an optimal learning curve.
Because they focused on control, first designing the machine to be maneuvered like a bicycle, they achieved a machine that allowed for easier, safer evolution. Their ingenuity lay in getting the most out of the least, contrasting sharply with the expensive, abstract, and ultimately flawed approach of the government-backed competition.
This successful reversal emphasizes that mechanical intelligence is not a degraded form of thinking. In fact, to truly achieve dimensional intelligence, you need strategy 3, returning to primal forms of intelligence.
We must free our minds from constant verbalization and tap into non-verbal, spatial, and mechanical thinking.
For Leonardo da Vinci, drawing and thinking were essentially synonymous.
He was obsessed with capturing human expression, grimacing, laughing, pained faces, sketching dozens of different noses in profile, and studying how light affected objects. This constant, intense observational exercise sharpened his visual thinking, training his mind to perceive reality in terms of images and structures, not just words.
And Michael Faraday, despite his scientific genius, took formal lessons in drawing and painting. Why?
Not just to recreate experiments, but because the physical act of drawing helped him think visually and spatially, strengthening that critical hand-brain connection and allowing him to conceptualize electromagnetic fields in a way his mathematically focused contemporaries could not.
Santiago Calatrava perfectly illustrates exteriorizing unconscious visions through sketching. When designing the immense folding doors for a warehouse, he used free associative sketching.
He drew the image of a beached whale, then began to metaphorically metamorphose the whale's open mouth into the architectural bay door. He realized the guiding image. The building is a living organism.
This nonverbal process allowed the overall structure to emerge intuitively before he made it rational and architectural.
These masters actively cultivated spatial and visual thinking, which our heavily word-focused culture often neglects, leading to one-dimensional thought.
And this exhaustive process of rational and spatial exploration is what finally prepares the mind for strategy 4. The masters return to the source, the intuitive flash.
This leap of insight only occurs after immense focused effort.
Recall Einstein's months-long struggle with the paradox of relative speed. If a woman ran toward a light beam on a train and a man stood on the tracks, the speed of light relative to both observers seemed contradictory, violating the rules of classical physics.
He had exhausted all his rational and mathematical tools and had decided by May 1905 to give up the entire problem.
But the mind does not simply turn off.
No. While walking with a colleague in Bern, explaining the dead end he had reached, he suddenly understood the key to the problem. It came to him as a grand, intuitive flash, a split-second insight that the simultaneous experience of time itself was relative.
An idea that altered our entire concept of the universe.
The critical point here is that the flash was not a miracle. It was the inevitable fruit of having first exhausted every rational, observational, and detailed analysis beforehand. His mind, operating at the mastery level, had processed the incredibly complex layers of information and gained a sudden, integrated sense of the whole.
So here's where it gets really interesting. We've traced mastery as a comprehensive story of dedication and transformation, finding the primal inclination, undergoing the crucible of apprenticeship, mastering the social chessboard, and finally achieving the dimensional leap of original thought.
And the common thread among these masters, Franklin, Darwin, Mozart, Temple Grandin, is fundamentally not inborn genius. That idea is, as our sources suggest, often a comforting vanity for those who wish to avoid the struggle.
Instead, the commonality is the intensity of their attention, their willingness to suffer setbacks, and the tenacity to never ever give up.
Marcel Proust, who spent an elaborate 20-year apprenticeship studying writing and human nature, embodies this entire journey. He amassed a vast knowledge of French society and accumulated thousands of pages of writing, much of it failure, much of it conventional. But he never stopped, deciding that all his failures had a purpose, like seeds to be cultivated. He finally discovered his authentic voice, the voice that would define his masterpiece, only after 2 decades of intense observation, discipline, and constant refinement.
And the world today is highly complex, chaotic, and relentlessly distracting. It urgently demands this level of dimensional thinking and cognitive resilience.
You must consciously learn how to learn. You must see your career not as a ladder, but as a long adventure, and be absolutely relentless in your pursuit of expansion.
Like Zora Neale Hurston, who kept moving from night school to Howard University to Barnard College, constantly widening her scope and refusing to stagnate in one area.
We have to strive for the ideal of the universal man or woman like Goethe, who consciously combined arts, politics, and precursor sciences like morphology.
We live in a culture that places an immense value on intellect and reasoning with words, often leading us to think of working with our hands or dealing with physical reality as degraded skills meant for others.
And this is an extremely counterproductive cultural value. The reality is that the human brain evolved in intimate conjunction with the hand. Working with our hands teaches sequencing, organization of thought, mechanical intelligence, and problem-solving skills that have profound, wider applications to abstract problems.
It keeps the mind grounded in reality.
It does.
This raises an important question for you to consider, something to mull over long after this deep dive ends. Given how vital that tactile mechanical intelligence is for true holistic mastery, how are you currently finding ways, even as a side activity, to work with your hands and reconnect with the physical world that is so essential for sharpening your dimensional mind?